I'm going to jump right in. Now, I mentioned to you earlier when we were chatting, I don't really like to do a full bio and reread what's on your LinkedIn profile, introduce who you are. People can do that. We'll put it in the show notes. As way of introduction, I'd like to open it up by asking you, what is your current priorities or business or projects? What if I was to ask you, what are you doing now? What's your business?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm a leadership development coach with LMI Sled Edge Group in the Reset of Moncton, New Brunswick. And, in 2021, I am on a mission to dramatically impact the lives of 50 Atlantic Canadian women leaders. How am I going to do that? That's a lovely question. Basically by helping them realize their full potential and having more female leaders own their place at that proverbial leadership table. They've already earned the stripes, but I want them to own that place. So I've made that my personal mission, my professional mission for 2021. And I'm super stoked to be able to have conversations like this to help it get there.
So I think we're gonna go all over the map, and we're definitely gonna come back to that. I think that you would be one of the first, like, by all definitions, serial entrepreneurs that we've had on to date. And I know a little bit about your history, especially from an external point of view. I was wondering, before we get into some of that, when do you think that you would have self-labeled as an entrepreneur? Somebody who looks back, who's done many different businesses, when would you have started calling yourself that first?
I'd say it's probably when I was about 22, 23 years old. I had a sign manufacturing company. And for the most part, I think I was just kind of like hustling and enjoying like the fun of the business and obviously the making the money. But there was the moment when the media reached out to me and wanted to do an interview with me. And I was like, why do they want to interview me? And they were watching this, young little whippersnapper doing all these cool things in Atlantic Canada. And all of a sudden, my face was on the front page of, like, I think it was KV Style in Rossay. And then the radio reached out to me and I was like, oh, I think I'm an entrepreneur now. So that was the moment where I kind of bought into, this is more than just fun and money. It's like, oh no, I get to have the title.
So a lot of people, when they're along that, or maybe well before, or well after, they talk about taking the leap. What was the first steps for you? Was it the sign company, or was there something before that? What was the first steps for you?
You know what? I've been asked this question a few times, and I think my answer would just be the moment I realized that, and I laugh a little when I say this, that I'm not really employable. And, and I had this creative mindset and this creative brain. And so whenever I had an idea, I just did it. Like I just had, I can't say I have that same energy today, but I didn't have all the fears back in my late teens, early 20s. So it was just like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. I'm going to do that. And then I would do it, and, I'd find success in it. And, that saying, I'd fail forward. And I did a lot of failing forward, but it's the leap was just in the doing. It was like, okay, this seems like a good idea. I think I shall do it. And then I did it.
Could you think of what it actually was? Was it buying a URL, or was it signing a contract, or was it?
Oh, for me, it always starts in the creative. I don't know why, because every business book tells you not to do that, but it would be like designing a logo or coming up with a business name. Like my sign company was Valley Words of Wisdom Decor. And I had like the tree of life as my logo. And before I had ever made a sign, I had the packaging of how I was going to sell it in retail stores. Like it was the creative first. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should go get some sales. And then I went out and I sold.
So you've had, how many businesses was it that you told me the other day?
8.
So
8 different companies. Yeah.
And some of those have been, fail forward along the way.
Yeah, there's been a couple.
Can you actually rattle them off? Like, what's the timeline?
Oh, I can try. So if anyone knows my history, if I'm wrong, I apologize. So, my very first company I ever got into was, like most people where they start, it was Mary Kay. 18 years old was Mary Kay. Soon after that, I created a jewelry manufacturing company. I know that sounds funny, but like people used to make jewelry. Well, I made jewelry, and then I found ways to sell it to retail stores all over Atlantic Canada. I had 10 different designs because I figured if I only had 10, I could sell more. And so I sold to retail stores. Then I moved into having a sign company that was Valley Words of Wisdom Decor. Same concept. I really liked signs like Dance Like Nobody's Watching on my walls. Figured that I could customize them and sell them to people like you because you want that quote on your wall as well. But then it was easier to sell to companies who was going to sell to you. So then again, I wholesaled it all from the basement of my house. Then I had a retail store called Naturally for Life, the Eco Store, that pivoted into Earth's Eco Shop. We had a wellness center, so naturopathic doctors, Reiki practitioners, massage therapists, nutritionists within there. I had my own publishing company. I had It's Your Life magazine that I had writers from all over North America a part of it. Then I bought Property Guys. Then I bought Marlin Travel. I had somewhere's in there, I had a marketing agency, Executed Solutions. And somewhere's in there, I had a company called Blue and Foggy too. So that actually could be more than 8. I've lost count at this point. And now you have my service-based company, Balance Equation Coaching and Consulting, where I've affiliated myself with LMI Slight Edge Group, and it's been a blast.
So most of the people in this probably know, and that I went through my own closure and rebirth. What's when you think back, did failing forward or making the decision to call it done become easier to see or to make that call? I've always wondered because I've only done it once.
So I would say 110%. Yeah. Like, the very first failure, I almost very quickly went into the fetal position because and you probably recognize this, like I was the brand, like I attached myself so closely. Every company I've ever been a part of and owned, I immerse myself into it. It becomes a part of my DNA. And so when it failed, it was like, well, you failed. And so, I very quickly went into the fetal position, sucking my thumb. But then there's that moment of rebirth that has to happen because you're either like stay down or you get back up. There's like really only 2 choices. And so for me, staying down was it's not in my DNA. And so anything that went wrong, I will say this, nothing has ever gone to that level of wrong again. Like, thank goodness I've never had to close a company of that size and go bankrupt. Have there been failed business partnerships? Yep. Have there been missteps in losing a client or making the wrong move? Yes, but nothing at that level. So I would say it taught me so much about my superpowers. We were talking about that the other day, playing in my sandbox and not trying to be everything to everybody and not trying to do all the different aspects of my business, which is why companies like you guys exist, right? Play to what I'm good at and don't try to play to the rest. So it definitely taught me a lot about that. And I'm much quicker to make a decision. When things are not going the way they should, I don't just stick to it because I said I'll stick to it. It's no, let's make a quick calculation here. Is this what's the trajectory? Am I going on a success one, or is this going down? If it's going down, okay, let me pivot or iterate real quick so that I can find a success through the mess, right?
So when people talk about serial entrepreneurs and business after business, sometimes they just see that it either affects them less or it's easier for them or they have a certain personality. So I do, if you don't mind, because I know you're an open person, I love to explore a little bit more of the realities. How much time was there what does that look like from you closing and before rebirth or restart or
3 weeks? 3 weeks. And I'll tell you what, I don't
for
know
each one?
Some of them overlap, to be honest. I've had some of the companies I've owned 2 at the same time. I would say there's never been a time in my life where I've not, in my adult life, that I've not had a company that I've been a part of. So I'd say there's, if we were talking about dating, I don't allow much time between my dating of businesses. I get back on that horse rather quickly, because again, I figured out what my skills are, and my skills are transferable. It doesn't really care, it doesn't matter what the company is or the brand is, as long as there's a place for me within that organization to use my superpowers and my skills. But yeah, from the big failure, going bankrupt, I'd say about 3 weeks from I had a friend call me and was like, are you done sucking your thumb yet? It was Hal Summers from Miramichi. Are you done sucking? I was like, what do you mean am I done sooking? And he's like, well, he's like, I got this issue. I got this problem. You have this skill set. I'd like to hire you to come in. And I'm like, oh, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, so I'm going to pay you this amount. And I was like, hung up the phone from him, picked up the phone, called a couple friends of mine who were consultants. And I said, how much do consultants get paid? And they were like, well, are they good consultants? I was like, yeah, I'm a good consultant. And then called Hal back. I came back to him 10 times the price that he had originally offered me, started a company right there. So I then had a consulting agency. So yeah, I would say I get back up on my feet pretty quick.
So for context, I was a lot longer than 3 weeks. So the one other like pry into this time or these times, I know that you're a people person, and I know that for you relationships matter. I think that's obvious from all of your social media presence and anybody who takes the time to learn about you. I think that I'm a similar mindset. I think we're aligned on that. One of the things that I think back that was the worst for me and the thing I was most hung up about was the relationship damage of and the impact. And I was wondering if you have any advice or learnings or experience over those different chapters of how you managed to either keep or, things you would do to maybe not have lost them if you did.
You know what? I will say I'm rather blessed that in the midst of going through this, I was in my first year of the Walson McCain Institute, ELP4. And so there were several individuals within our organization that had gone through a business failure and a bankruptcy previous, that I decided prior to making that decision to pick up the phone and call them and just be like, what am I in for? And I got similar advice from all of them, and I took their advice. And it was like, own your narrative. Like, don't let the media or social media take over the story. So as soon as I knew it was going to happen, I reached out to the media, and they did a story on me, but it was a positive spin. And I picked up the phone and I called the individuals that were local that I knew I wasn't going to be able to pay. And I let them know the story. And it wasn't an excuse. It was sort of like, here's the reality. And it's like, anybody who's been a supplier of yours kind of knows what's going on in some way or another. So I guess owning the narrative would be the thing that I think helped me, because, those individuals who gave me the advice when they talked about like their experience of going through a business failure, especially here in Atlantic Canada, because we're so small, like they got reamed through media and social media. And that was their one regret, is they didn't own the narrative. And so when I owned the narrative, it was a much different. Now, did I have a few people message me and not be so kind? Yeah, but it wasn't, I think, at the level it could have been if I didn't try to change the story. And I was instantly vulnerable. Like I instantly shared why I messed up, why I mucked up, what I could have done differently. And it was back then that I was talking about wanting to teach others how not to make the same mistakes I did all the way back then. It was almost like I knew that this is where I was going to end up. Mm-hmm. It took me a little bit to get here, but yeah.
So let's talk about your current passion. It's a topic we had a chat. When I think of female leadership and entrepreneurship, I think now of my grandmother, who we talked about a little bit, like the fact that she ran and helped grow businesses in the 60s and 70s and 80s. I now think back, because I think I was just like, I don't have quite the same lens that a traditional stereotypical white male has. Mm-hmm. But I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's a lot of realities that aren't great, that are specific and unique challenges on top of an existingly challenging space to be in. Mm-hmm. So I'd love it if we can open this up by talking about like some of the realities that you're helping clients with. What are the challenges that you see more often, and the things that people should understand are common challenges?
You know what? I think for me, the most common in any of the female leaders and entrepreneurs that I'm working with is just there's this pressure to be everything to everyone, right? Like to be an awesome career woman, businesswoman, the top of my game there, to be an epic spouse, wife, partner, to be the greatest mom, to be the best, board member, community citizen, philanthropist. It's just like the list goes on and on and on. And I think that there's like almost like there's this space where we forget to put the mask on ourselves. And that's like the easiest way I can say it. It's like everyone I've seemed to be having conversations with, they're just like, they're on the tipping point of a burnout. They're on the tipping point of like, it's like one little cherry of chaos or, you know, a muck up in a day could throw their entire week, month, quarter off because they're just forever trying to like play in the teeter-totter of life. And, you know, I think somebody a long time ago said, you know, women can have it all. And I believe we can. I just don't think we can have it all at once. Like, I think that there's presence in focus, and focus to me is follow one course until successful. And I think we need to dive deeper into like what's our priorities and what's important to us. You know, like at the end of the day, nobody's getting to their, you know, 85, 90, 105, you know, on their deathbed saying, you know what, I'm really glad I worked 85 hours a week. Like nobody's saying that. But so many people, you know, you see it on social media, or I have conversations with people, and it's like, you know, how you doing? Busy, really busy, you know, like burning the candle at both ends. And we're almost like praising each other for that. And I don't know if that's pressure we've put on ourselves or if society's done it, but somewhere along the line, I think like the buck's got to stop, and women need to be confident in their leadership space that they don't need to burn the candle at both ends. Like they are actually better in the roles, better for the organization if they're on their peak game and everywhere else. Like if you have a great relationship with your spouse and you're being able to be there for your kids and you are taking time out for yourself, you're going to be better, you know, better in a better position in the roles that you are within the organizations you're leading.
That's great. Before we move on, I'd love to get that focus and acronym again. I thought that was really great.
Yeah. So focus is follow one course until successful. You try to chase two rabbits, you catch none. And it's like, and I think back to when I used to,
simple and so complicated to do.
I know it is, especially for those of us who are, you know, big visionaries. Like we have so many great ideas and so many creative thoughts. And, you know, my advice always to people is like to have literally a parking lot. Like I have a parking lot of ideas. It's over there on my wall. And if you saw it, you'd be like, Terri-Ann is like a mad scientist. Like what is happening in her brain? But there's so many, they're all great in my opinion. I just can't do them all. I got to focus on what is the goal for this year. The goal for this year is 50 Atlantic Canadian women. That's it. Now, if I get other stuff, that's cool, but that's the goal for this year. And I can't try to chase anything else, because if I do, I'm going to get to the end of the year and I'm not going to get where I want it to go.
When we talked earlier, you had an interesting stat or thought around the like tangible economic impact if female leaders owned what they did. You explore that a little bit further. You had some really good information there that I might not be portraying.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, in a nutshell, if we reduce the gender gap in terms of women in leadership roles, women owning that space at their full capacity, by 2026, Canada would increase our GDP by $150 billion. So economically speaking, like let's not talk about all the other areas, but economically speaking, if more of us rose up into our leadership positions, but rose up in a way that we can sustain, right? Like there's beauty in the hustle, but the hustle is not 365 days a year. Like hustle to me is like a short sprint. So to get into those leadership roles in a way that it's sustainable, that we're owning it, you know, our shoulders are relaxed, our head, they're held high, we're speaking up at the table, our opinions matter, our opinions count, that will reduce that'll reduce the gender gap, but it'll increase our GDP by 150 billion. Like that's a B. Like that's not a million, that's a B, a billion. That's huge. Imagine how the trickle down effect for our communities, for our children, for all the things that we worry about in terms of, you know, how our economy affects some of the things that are happening locally, it would change because we rose up.
Unleashed.
Unleash the woman.
So what advice would you have for a female business owner today on next steps? Maybe aside from calling Terri-Ann.
Definitely call me. I love to have virtual coffees right now. You know what? I think you need to find your focus. Simon Sinek's find your why, find your purpose. What is it that gets you like basically up and out of your bed running every morning, right? Like what excites you? And then you need to put your energy and your focus on that. I think we need to be unapologetically ourselves. I think we need to stop apologizing when we speak up and, you know, voice our concerns, our opinions, our thoughts. No harm to any of the men, but when like most men speak up, they just speak up. They're just sharing an opinion and a thought, and they're like, "This is what I think." But you know, a woman goes to do it, and it happens more often than not. It's like, I'm sorry, I have this idea. Is it okay if I say it? It's like, of course it's okay. And what you're saying counts, and it can completely change the trajectory of that organization, of the culture, of your life, just because you finally are yourself. So I think women need to decide what their focus is, what their why is, and then they need to be unapologetically themselves in a kind and professional way. Like, don't be walking in and being mean, but you know, speak
Unless
up.
you're authentically mean, is that what you...
I hope nobody's authentically mean.
No, I hope not. If you were talking to somebody who's a professional or working in an organization where they don't have quite the same control over their trajectory, would your advice change any?
Nope. No, there's tons of books on how to lead up. It'd be the lighthouse, right? And Steve Daniels and I talk about this all the time. It's like you can either be a tugboat and try to tell people what they should do, or you can be the lighthouse. And all that means is if I show up every day like myself, and so I would describe me as somebody who enjoys making impact, and I enjoy grit. And grit for me is like the combination of passion, purpose, and perseverance. So if I show up every day like that, by nature, you're like, I want whatever her tea is. Like, I want to be more like that. And so you're going to show up with a little bit more grit, and you're going to show up wanting to make that much more impact. So I don't think your title matters. I don't think where you are in the organization matters. I think the fact that you care, because you've very clearly identified that why, that focus, then by nature, you can influence people just by speaking up and being like, this is what I'm excited about. Like, do you know how many people get excited when I say, I want to impact 50 Atlantic Canadian women this year? They're like, well, yeah, let me be a part of that train. And some of them are women and some of them are men, because they see what that'll do for our communities. So I think you just be the lighthouse. And by nature, those who want to do great things will, you know, be attracted to your light, and those who don't will, you know, hide away from your light. That's okay too.
I really like the lighthouse tugboat analogy. I think that's really great. There should be a graphic around that for sure. Can you go back and redefine what grit means to you? I think you had a really good, concise way of describing that. I'd love to have that.
Yeah, so grit to me, and grit's been a favorite word of mine for years for a number of reasons. But grit is that ability. And again, it comes down to that why, is the combination of passion, purpose, and perseverance. Like, if my why is big enough, it'll be bigger than the what that gets in my way. And there's always a what that'll get in your way, right? Like, you know, it's finances, it's the boss who doesn't want, you know, who micromanages you and tells you you can't, you know, be this and doesn't give you enough autonomy. There's always a bunch of stuff that's in your way. But if the why is big enough, that passion and that purpose is big enough, you will persevere over, under, or through. And so if you wake up every day with grit, like you're kicking butt and taking names.
I do like your why being bigger than the what. That's great. So some of the questions I ask everybody, just because I really like to see the different answers. One of them is, if you look back all of your career as an entrepreneur, and I do like the idea of terming it as a career. I think it's an interesting career path. What was the single most, or what comes up most when you think about it as the exciting moment? Like when you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Anything come to mind?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, probably more than a couple, maybe like 6 years ago, I was invited to speak at a youth entrepreneurship conference in Moncton. And my daughter was there. And, you know, I had my daughter when I was 17, right? Like I quickly went into business at like 18 and a half years old. And I got up on stage and I had this like pull to bring her up on stage. And I shifted my talk completely to her. It was like everybody in the room disappeared and I spoke directly to her and how much impact she's had on my life and me as an entrepreneur. And that it didn't matter her age or anyway, it was just a really emotional moment. And somebody grabbed a photo of that, and I have it upstairs, and I actually have it on my profile as well. And it's a moment I look back to with so much gratitude, because my daughter was there. She was so much a part of, my growing up, but she also, in a lot of ways, is a reason why I am who I am today. Like, she's a part of that grit, right? Like, my why was big enough because I needed to support my daughter. I was a single mom back then, and, over, under, or through, we did it. And she's just looks at me with such awe, and you can see the love and respect she has for me, but I needed her to know that I had that same love and respect for her. And yeah, it was a pretty awesome moment.
That's great. I love that so far trending, none of those answers have been financially motivated. They've been moments of gratitude and presence and vulnerability. And I think that's just an interesting commonality. So the counterpart to that question, which I gave you a little bit of warning, is no entrepreneur or business owner has it all together and has it all figured out and everything working under the hood. So if I was to ask you, what are if you looking back, just cringe, I can't believe I made that mistake, what comes to mind?
Do you have a couple hours? You know what? For me, I think my ego was big in my 20s. Holy heck. Like, I was a micromanager. I thought I knew it all, could do it all. And I thought I was an accountant. I thought I was an HR person. Like, I tried to be it all in my organization. I was like 25, 26 years old, and I had about 15 employees. And I cringe at the thought of me thinking I can do my own books. Like, like the idea of that is just ridiculous. Like, that is not my superpower. It's not even it's not even a 2 in my superpowers. It's just not something I should be doing. But just, I wasn't playing to my strengths. I was just trying to do everything. And no wonder I burnt out after 4 years of trying to do that. So it's why I say, like, play to your superpowers and, like, delegate the rest or automate it.
You mentioned the word burnout. Can you define what that means to you?
Yeah, so this would have been, I had 2 companies going at the same time. I had my Valley Words of Wisdom, my sign company, and I think it was year 1 in my retail store at the time. So I was working like 75, 80 hours a week. I was traveling between 2 stores because I had a store in Ross and a store in St. Andrews. And you're stressed. You're like high, I think probably your cortisol levels are just super high because you're always in worry mode and you're always thinking of the next thing. And I was just trying to juggle too many balls. And I just told you I sucked at delegation. So I also was doing everything. And I remember hosting like a little Christmas party at the end of the year, and like maybe having 1 glass of wine and being like, oh, something's weird, like something's off. And by the next morning when I woke up, my entire equilibrium was off. Like, I couldn't stand straight. I was like standing sideways. And that progressed over the next 48 hours to the point where I had then lost my vision and had to be hospitalized. The very first thing they thought I had MS. Anyway, a bunch of blood work, and just my adrenal glands were like at their tail end. Cortisol levels were super high, and the doctor, it wasn't called burnout back then because that's now something we can define today. But stress, like, just, I had too much stress in my life, and my body was like, you're not paying attention. You're not listening to the yellow and orange flags that I've been giving you this entire year. Let me just shut you down. And that's what it did. It shut me down. I was in the hospital right up until Christmas. And when I got out of the hospital, it took me 3 months to recover. Like, I couldn't drive. I walked like I was under the influence at all times. I had like severe vertigo. And it was very scary, especially when they're naming all of these, diseases that potentially you have, right? But the reality was, it was like, once I knew that and took the step back, I was forced to then delegate because there was like 3 months where I couldn't really run my business. And then I realized, oh, my company doesn't need me to do everything. Huh, that's funny. You don't have to be, the end all be all in all parts, and the darn thing can still run. And so when I went back, I went at it very different. And yeah, it's scary. It's a real thing. And I've witnessed a lot of peers and friends go through something similar. And some of them have not been so lucky. It's completely knocked the wind out of their sails. They've lost companies. They've lost relationships. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's interesting because I like to explore that because the word burnout isn't really well defined. And I know a lot of people who talk about burnout, and I think there's stress. Stress is natural and it's a response. There's overwhelm, and
Yep.
overwhelm is, but burnout for me, in my personal opinion, is a physical manifestation that shuts you down.
Oh, it
And
is.
it's
Yeah.
very real, it's very dangerous, it's very scary. So having gone
Yeah.
through that, it's like, it's not to belittle stress and overwhelm, because those are big things, but yeah,
Well, I
it's a
almost think
real.
it almost shines a light on them. So like stress is the yellow flag, overwhelm is like the orange flag, and burnout is the red flag. And so if you're not paying attention here and you're not paying attention there,
Mhm.
guess where you're headed? You're headed to burnout. And that's when your body takes over and says, you are no longer the captain of this ship. I am shutting you down because you're not listening. And it's completely scary because, people can have heart attacks in that space. Like it's not a healthy space to be.
So my understanding, based on my experience with other people, is that deciding I'm going to change isn't super easy. How have you avoided like scope creep or coming back to that overwhelm? Or do you have any hard and fast like learnings or advice or practices that have allowed you to maintain some sort of balance?
Yep. So mine was some simple things like I don't have my cell phone on. Like if you call me, you don't get through to me. It's always on mute. That may not be, ideal for everybody, but those are some things I had to do. My phone does not come in my bedroom at night. I time block. I don't scroll through social media like I used to. It's like I time block. I go in, I do the posts that I'm supposed to do. I respond to people. I look at a couple things and then I get off of it. I schedule regular me time. I work out on a regular basis. Like when you get on an airplane, I know it's been a long time for most people, but when you get on an airplane, one of the instructions is like in the event of an emergency and the oxygen mask go down, put the mask on yourself first before you put it on anyone else. Well, that's what we're supposed to do. You need to take care of you first so that you're at the best version of you, the peak performance of you, so that you can do the awesome things in entrepreneurship and in the business and for your family. If you're putting it on everyone else first, you're leading yourself to disaster. So I very regularly water this garden so that I am awesome for everybody out there. And I think I have better boundaries. I don't say yes to everything, again, because I'm very clear on my why. I have focus. I don't try to be everything to everyone. I'm not a people pleaser anymore. There's a lot of things. And I don't know if they all happened overnight. There was probably a little bit of anxiousness as I was letting go of some of those things. But now it's like, I like it. I'm like, my kids have to call somebody else to be like, how do we get to mom? Right. Cause mom's not answering the phone whenever we want her. Right. So yeah.
So you mentioned Simon Sinek and you mentioned, finding the why. I think that's really important. So I think purpose and your why, whatever you want to call it, is really important, whether you're an entrepreneur or not an entrepreneur. It makes it for me, the way I think about it is if you're choosing to work extra hard or invest parts of your life, it's very different than feeling that you're forced to do it. And choosing is part of finding your why. So any other advice if somebody was saying, I have no idea how to find my why? And maybe they've already seen Simon Sinek. So other than that, like, how would you recommend they start the journey of finding their why or what they want to do?
I think, the common question is if money was no longer and like a challenge, an option, a thing that, was a hindrance, what would you do with your days? Like, and there's typically value in that. Like, oh, well, I'd travel the world. Okay. So why would you travel the world? There's a really good process called 7 levels deep. And it's about asking a why 7 levels deep. So, because usually surface level is just crap. Like, it's just like, I want to be this cause this. And it's like what society would want to hear. But it's usually when I get to that 7th level that there's a lot more emotion attached to it. So, what do you really want out of life? Well, I want to be a millionaire. Okay, cool. Well, why do you want to be a millionaire? Well, I want to be a millionaire because, I want to be able to support my kids and provide a life for them that, I never had. Okay, well, why do you want that? And then it's like, then you get to this root and it's like really their core beacon system is all attached around, wanting less people to be living in poverty. And it's like, oh, okay, there's a passion. So is there a potential career or business around that where you're feeding that passion? So those would be my first few tips.
Great. So changing topics a little bit, you've mentioned your BHAG, your goal for this year is the 50, and you're specifically saying Atlantic Canadian.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, like, that's an applied focus that some people have a hard time doing. And I was wondering if how did you come up with that, and what is that intention, that limitation of not in a virtual world, you could be going anywhere?
Okay, so I'll tell you my reasoning for it. So in a virtual world, it's really easy to think globally. It's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. The reality is like I'm a little fish in a big pond of the global world, and my influence is not as great globally. Like I'm not Tony Robbins yet, right? So on a big scale, I'm not there, but on a little scale, I have a lot more from a networking perspective, from an influence perspective. I have a lot more contacts here. So that was number one. Number two, this is my home, right? Like if I help to improve the lives of individuals here in Atlantic Canada, that only serves to increase the health of our communities locally, which is then going to make a better place for my kids. And oh, did I mention I'm a grandma? So for my grandson as well. And it's like it's the trickle down effect. It's the butterfly effect. If I do these things that I'm super passionate about by helping other people do things that they're super passionate about, Atlantic Canada is only going to be that much more greater. And, you know, I have a lot of confidence in the female leaders in Atlantic Canada, and I want to be the catalyst of change. Like I want to see that trajectory grow. I want to see Atlantic Canadians be like on the map globally, because that's only going to help me for whatever my next goal is.
So, I totally agree. I think we're very aligned in that. I'm looking forward to, I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of ways to collaborate in the future, which is exciting. I'm going to start tying in a few questions from the audience. One of them that's kind of aligned with our conversation we just had is, do you think that there's such a thing as too much focus? So if you decide your why and your purpose, are you ever fearful that'll blind you to other possibilities?
So no. And I don't really know how to give clarity to that beyond like, I don't have blinders up with focus, right? Like, you know, it's part of like the process that we do, like through LMI is like, you're forever tracking your progress, right? So, you know, I have a trajectory of 50 Atlantic Canadian female leaders, right? And I have a process I'm going to take between now and December 31st to get me there. And along the way, I'm iterating, right? Like the goal remains the same, but the how I'm getting there, it tweaks and changes. And, you know, opportunities like this, where I get to come on and share my story and share my mission, are there. That wasn't on my list of to-dos, but I jumped at the opportunity because it felt right. So no, because I'm always looking at my goal and always coming back to it, the how to get there tweaks and changes. So I can see new opportunities, and I don't get so laser focused that I forget to come up for air, right? Hopefully that answers the question.
No, yeah. So we talked about your many different ideas, and the projects and businesses you've been on. And then we've, in the more recent times, talked about purpose and why. Can you help the audience or the listeners understand how you've connected your why across that journey?
Yeah. So when I had made the decision to go into coaching, part of it was because I had been an entrepreneur, you know, been in business for so long. A lot of people just, you get this, like, they just want to call you and pick your brain, right? Like, and so forever I was just like going on coffee dates, like giving people information, feedback, mentoring them. So it kind of became like a very clear path to being a coach. But then when I started to decide, like, well, who do I want to coach and what do I want to coach on? I don't know if I read it in a book or somebody said it to me, but coach on what you know. Like, look at everything you've accomplished, including the mistakes that you've overcome, and go find those people, because typically the people that you can support and help the most are people who are like who you used to be. So for me, in figuring out like, what is it that I value? And I've always been impact driven. So like, as a part of every business I've been a part of, there's always been a way I've given back to the community, or in terms of like just showing up for coffee dates and giving my time for free. That's always been a part of what I did. And now I just found a way to take a business and do what I love. Obviously, you know, make money doing it, be able to support my family doing it, but like I'm watching the reward. So it's like, it's filling my cup, filling their cup. It's a win-win. But I think a lot of it just has to do with all the past experiences. It was natural. Like, this is the first business I can say is just like, this is just a natural fit. Like, this is where I want to be for the rest of my life, which is funny. So
if we took all of your experience since feeling that and got rid of it and looked back further into the history pre moment, how were you making those decisions? So something, I have a couple of different questions. One was, how to decide when to pivot or when to quit? And
Okay.
also, when you were pivoting or quitting or starting something new, how did you make those decisions? Was it tied to a why? Was it tied to an existing opportunity? How did you make some of those decisions and before you're in your current business or role?
Mm. I think there's different answers for probably any of the businesses I've been in. And I will tell you in the beginning, I don't think I had a solid formula or process for it. I was somebody that got really excited for opportunities in my early 20s. So I was like, ooh, shiny new object with sparkles. I think I shall jump on that plane. So that was my formula in the beginning. As I matured in entrepreneurship, I would say I was really just about putting things on paper. Like I'm a pen and paper kind of girl, a little bit of a traditionalist in that way. And it was about, writing down like what I was wanting to accomplish. Usually for me, it was within the 1 to 3 year mark. I won't lie. My 20s, it was a lot around finances. It was around numbers, like how successful do I think I can bring this organization? What's the revenue projections? It wasn't really until my early 30s that it started to get more attached to a why. And that's the truth. And I found the moment that I attached it to something that felt like big here, that's when there was more success, but also it just felt easier. Like I can't explain it any better than that. It's just like when you're doing something because you're passionate in here, it's much different than when it's about dollars and cents. Yeah.
So over time, have you developed any process or core tools or ways of approaching new opportunities or needs in the marketplace? Like how do you look ahead and see whether that's something you want to get into, or is it still kind of a gut check?
I'm going to say it's probably a lot to do with my gut. And
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had, maybe someday I'll figure out what the actual science is. But I think a lot of it has to do with gut. Mine is, again, a lot based on values. Like, do I feel like I can make impact on my community by being a part of this organization? Check. Do I feel like I can still have, balance and a semblance of like a personal life while being a part of this organization? Yeah, check. Do I have, freedom, flexibility, autonomy? Like again, I've gotten really clear of like what my why is, but also like what my core system is, like my values. So when I'm saying yes to an opportunity, whether it's, speaking or what have you, I don't do things just for the heck of it. I do it because I'm like, oh no, that makes sense because that's aligned with who I am. And they kind of believe in the same things that I do, or that'll help me make more impact on people. So, okay, yeah, I'll say yes to that. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about a lot of really great sound bites and books and authors and videos have come out. When you're either consulting or you're doing your coffee dates, are there any real perspective shifting? We talked earlier, I believe in really great content, but for every piece of content, there's 1,000 pieces of garbage to help us along these journeys. I'd love to like anything that you would recommend they reach out to and look at, read, embrace, listen
So
to.
I mean there's one book specifically I've read over 5 times. It's Choice Theory. So it's not like your typical book that you would think you should buy, in terms of leadership and business, but it's all about taking that perspective of fault versus responsibility. So many people, it's like, I lost my job because of this. I'm this type of way because of what happened in my past. And it's about taking responsibility. Like it's about putting choice and decision making back into the power of me as as Terri-Ann, as you, as Levi, versus trying to stick my finger out externally and play the blame game and live in a forever vortex of victimhood. I find I read that book first when I was like 16, 17 years old, and I've read it numerous times since then. I've actually am now certified in choice theory and reality therapy because I have immersed myself into their system so much. And I think everybody should read it. Young people, older people, everybody.
So
Yeah.
I have been using a similar terminology around how important I want to find and work with people that were intrinsically motivated, who
Mm-hmm.
see themselves as the agents in their worlds. So I think that's probably something I should read
Yeah,
because
you
I've been
would, and
talking the talk.
it's great on audio too. It's a really quick book to listen to or to read. I'd encourage you to read it a few times just because you get new nuggets every time you read it. But it's a really good book. It's written by William Glasser.
Oh, great!
Yeah.
And before I kind of come to a close, is there anything else that, especially for female leaders, 'cause I think that's going to be something like I'm going to recommend the people I know in my world to listen to this chat, because I think it's really great, not just to hear advice and to hear from somebody with experience, but to hear that this is something everybody should be talking about. And it shouldn't be something that you're just holding in and living alone. And so I'm hoping that this opens up people to ask more questions and talk about it. Is there anything else we haven't gone over, addressed, or brought up that you would find valuable for those same people who are listening to this later?
Yep. So regardless of where you are on your leadership journey, I think there's a responsibility as a leader, and I think it's the power of three. So where I am today, there's always somebody who is above, I'm using the word above me, who's doing something that maybe I'd like to do, or they've been there and done it, that can mentor me. So always have somebody who's taking a hand and leaning back to you that you can get mentorship. Equally, you need somebody at your level that you can, vent, shoot the schniznit with, and just kind of like, talk about what's real and what's happening in your life. And then it is your responsibility as a community citizen and as a leader to have a hand back and help somebody who's trying to get where you are. And I think, again, it's about filling up the cup of others, but also filling up your cup. There's power in mentoring people, and there's power in being mentored and always being on a journey versus trying to get to a destination of leadership, because, there's something new to learn every day. So there's power in three. That'd be my advice.
Yeah, that's a great practical, measurable way to. I love. I name the business pragmatic, so I can bring the tactical in. I really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like I could take it in whole other directions. I think it's really refreshing every time I talk to somebody who's been through a lot of change, challenge, hardship, but also exciting moments, and they're open. I think it's probably around your mentality of the looking back and looking forward and understanding the power of mentorship. But these stories, it's a very isolating experience, I find, being a business owner, business leader, entrepreneur, change maker, whatever you want to call it. And it's, I really am glad that through all the challenges and transitions that you have leaned into that versus avoiding it. Because that's a route that a lot of people take, is that they shut off and they don't lean in.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I think we'll call it a close there for this conversation. It's amazing how 50 minutes can just,
I know,
disappear. I am going to come back down to the main floor level, and I'm hoping my team will have some questions and want to engage further. Awesome. But I'm really glad we had this conversation, and I hope we can connect again soon.